France plunges into a political and financial crisis as the government collapses in a no-confidence vote. Bitcoin bonanza. Prices surge over $100,000 for the first time as President-elect Trump picks a crypto-friendly candidate to run the top US financial watchdog. And we take a look at the business benefits for workers and bosses of corporate volunteering. Live from London, this is Business Today, and I'm Sally Bundock. So let's take a look in more detail at what's going on in France, where, as you've been hearing, the government's collapsed after a no-confidence vote in the Prime Minister Michel Barnier. The move leaves France facing months of turmoil, plunging the European Union's second biggest economy into a crisis. Opposition parties called the vote after Mr. Barnier used special powers to try and push through his budget without parliamentary approval. And that budget, that's now null and void, sought to deliver some €60 billion in tax rises and spending cuts. Money, he argued, is needed to restore France's spiralling budget deficit, a deficit that's predicted to rise to around 6% of France's total economic output this year, almost double the EU's target of 3%, which is designed to ensure member states pursue sound public finances. Leo Barinkou is from Oxford Economics. He's based in Paris, and I asked him what might happen next.
Well, the next steps now is for Macron to find a new prime minister that he will task to nominate a new government. And the main order of the day for the new government will be to try to pass a new budget, to have a budget for 2025. So it will probably be too late. So France will have to start the year without a budget. So the 2024 budget will be extended into 2025 until the new government can pass, hopefully, a new budget.
But the problem with Parliament currently is it's split and divided three ways, and getting agreement on a budget is going to be notoriously difficult, as Michel Barnier has discovered.
Yes, exactly, yes. I think it was the first time since 1962 that actually the French Parliament toppled the government, but we probably won't have to wait another 62 years to see it happen again. And in fact, the next government is likely to be just as weak as Barnier's government, because really it is impossible to find a stable majority in the current with the current National Assembly. It is nearly impossible. So the next government will also maybe fall very quickly too, and it will have a very hard time passing a budget for sure.
The President is going to address the nation later tonight on television. I think President Emmanuel Macron wants to try and portray himself as the calm in the storm, but many are calling for his resignation.
Yes, well, I think Macron's resignation remains somewhat of an outlier scenario. It's something that he has clearly excluded for now, but clearly pressure on him to resign will intensify in the months to come if France kind of proves ungovernable with the current National Assembly, because there cannot be new legislative elections until July 2025. And if governments keep falling like Barnier's did, pressure on Macron will clearly increase.
And just briefly, Leo, the impact this will have on the French economy in the short term?
Well, I would say in the very short term, at least, the main issue, of course, with the French economy is public finances. Growth has been somewhat resilient for now and should remain so next year. The main issue is the size of the deficit and the size of the public debt. In the short term, we are cautiously optimistic. I would say that there shouldn't be too much trouble. The fall of the government was something that was expected by the market. Maybe the spread between French and German government bonds will widen a bit, but it should stay broadly at the same level as now. But really, it's in the medium term that it's hard to see a way that France can find the money needed to reduce its deficit and to stabilize its debt.
Leo Barinkou there, looking at the latest developments in France. So within the European Union, its two biggest economies are in crisis. France has taken centre stage this week, but Germany is also facing snap elections early in the new year. In both countries, top politicians cannot agree on how to turn around their flagging economies and rising debts. This, as a new Trump presidency in the US poses fresh economic challenges for Europe. And this might explain Ursula von der Leyen's enthusiasm to clinch a long-delayed trade deal with a group of South American nations. The European Commission President is on her way to Uruguay for talks on the so-called EU-Mercosur deal. To help understand what that is, I talked to Dr. Aranza Gomez Arana from the University of Northumbria. She's written a book on the deal and outlined what it's all about.
This agreement economically will benefit both regions. On the Mercosur side, it will help to trade in a cheaper manner in relation to the agricultural sector. In particular, the trade between Mercosur countries and European Union countries will allow the export of something along the lines of 99,000 tons of beef with a reduced tariff of just 7.5%. And in relation to poultry, around 180,000 tons will enter the European Union duty-free. On the European Union side, the main benefits will go to countries like Germany, because they will be able to export to Mercosur countries cars and parts of cars with a much reduced tariff than the one that they currently have, which is quite high. And also the sector of pharmaceuticals, they will be allowed to export products with again, reduced tariffs.
So you can see why for Europe, they are keen on this trade deal, especially when trade relations with the US might become that much more fractious next year. However, France is not happy about this at all. President Emmanuel Macron is saying it's not good for European farmers. There are other key players within Europe who are not happy about this deal. And also in Mercosur, Argentina's Javier Milei is threatening to veto it as well. So do you think we will get a deal?
We have been waiting for this deal for 25 years, so I am cautious, but I am optimistic in particular because, as you just mentioned yourself, von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, is on her way to Uruguay, and that is a really good sign that the agreement finally will be done. In relation to the president of Argentina, Javier Milei, it is expected to some extent that he will help with this agreement. However, he has made very clear that if this agreement does not happen this time, he might either leave Mercosur or ask for a change of rules so Argentina can develop trade agreements with the United States and with China.
Really interesting. Dr. Aranza Gomez Arana there looking at that deal. We shall keep an eye on how it develops. But now we have to talk about Bitcoin because it would seem there is no stopping the rise of the world's leading cryptocurrency at the moment. So it's broken new ground, hitting all-time highs of over $100,000 a token. Feeding off the crypto positive pledges from President-elect Trump, Bitcoin surged more than 50% in value since the US election. Well, the latest boost comes off the back of Donald Trump's nomination for the head of the US Securities and Exchange Commission, which is the financial watchdog. He's nominated Paul Atkins, who's a veteran financial regulator and a crypto advocate. Here's more from Ritika Gupta.
Keeping with his promise for a crypto-friendly administration, President-elect Donald Trump plans to nominate former SEC Commissioner Paul Atkins to head the agency. That's according to a post on Truth Social. Currently the CEO at Potomac Global Partners, Atkins is well known on Wall Street and within Republican political circles. He'd been widely expected to get the role as the nation's top financial market regulator, and if confirmed, Atkins would succeed Gary Gensler, who has been widely lambasted by the digital currency community for his many efforts to crack down on the $3.5 trillion crypto market. Trump's position on crypto mirrors his larger pro-deregulation stance during his first time in office. Trump has promised an easier route for Bitcoin and its peers, and the market has soared since his election victory on November the 5th. Atkins served as SEC Commissioner from 2002 to 2008 under then-President George W. Bush. Along with adopting a pro-crypto stance, Atkins was critical of some of the reforms that emerged from the global financial crisis in 2008. Specifically, he criticized the Dodd-Frank legislation as too stringent on the banking industry.
Ritika Gupta there, who is in New York for us. Well, now let's head to our bureau in Singapore. Mariko Oy is there, and you've been watching how Bitcoin is trading. So what's happening at the moment?
Well, Sally, not only did it cross that $100,000 mark, it is currently trading well above it, almost $102,000 per token. It's incredible to think that it was worth almost nothing only 15 years ago when it first started trading. So I'm pretty sure many people will be kicking themselves thinking, I wish I bought it back then. I have to say, though, the price of Bitcoin has been known for extreme volatility. We've seen ups and downs, the price going on a roller coaster ride many times over the past decade. But that proposed nomination of Paul Atkins as the head of the SEC, that really sent a clear signal to the market that the US will be a lot more friendlier towards the cryptocurrencies industry, because he has spoken about deregulating the industry before. And definitely it prompted celebrations from cryptocurrency fans around the world.
And interestingly, it was quite a few hours between that nomination announcement and Bitcoin getting another boost. So do we know why there was a delay?
No, it's anyone's guess, but it is interesting to note that Asia is home to some of the biggest number of crypto traders. So I'm talking about China, India and South Korea, for example. So who knows, maybe they woke up and saw the news and started buying Bitcoin. But also it's interesting to note that in South Korea, there has been a reported surge in crypto trading since that martial law order was declared on Tuesday night, even though it was of course lifted several hours later. There was a huge surge in crypto trading. So that's something interesting to monitor as well.
Yeah, it is very much so. Thank you, Mariko. See you soon. Mariko Oy there. Let's bring you some other business stories. More from the US. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell has said he isn't worried President-elect Donald Trump will try to curb the independence of the central bank when he takes office in January. Speaking at an event in New York, Mr. Powell said the Fed's independence was protected by the law of the land. Airbus will cut 477 jobs in the UK as the plane maker scales back its space business and tries to trim costs. More than 2,000 jobs, that's 5% of its workforce, will be lost globally by mid-2026. The firm said compulsory job cuts are not planned, and they come as Airbus's profits fall while it struggles with bottlenecks in its supply chain. You're with Business Today. I'm Sally Bundock. Now, 2024 is drawing to a close, and when it comes to elections, it has been a history-making year. There have been more general elections this year across the globe than in any other year, impacting more than half the world's population. Don't we know it here at BBC News? It's been extremely busy. And there is more to come. This week, it is Ghana's turn, with the West African country going to the polls on Saturday to elect a new president and parliament. Daniel Dadzi has the details.
This year has been a year of elections.
Every single day I will be fighting for you.
More than 50 countries worldwide have headed to the polls. Well, now it's Ghana's turn, a country that has been seen as a reliable democracy in West Africa at a time when neighboring countries have overturned their governments. So here's what's at stake. First, Ghana's once booming economy is struggling. Young people face high unemployment, inflation is up, and debt keeps growing. But Ghana is not alone. In Kenya, similar debt issues led to protests and higher taxes, part of a larger debt crisis facing many developing nations. This economic frustration has young Ghanaians often choosing between staying or migrating. But they say this election gives them a chance to insist on policies which could make it easier for them at home. Then there's the environment. Illegal mining, known as galamsey, is devastating Ghana's forests and rivers. These forests also don't just matter to Ghana. These are rivers often used by the local community as sources of drinking water. They help absorb carbon emissions, making them critical in the fight against climate change.
For Ghana, climate change is real and immediate.
Young Ghanaians are joining a global movement, demanding leaders protect the land and the climate. And it all ties back to governance. Recent concerns about corruption and weak institutions have Ghanaians worried. With recent coups in neighboring countries, Ghana's stability matters for the entire region. A strong, democratic Ghana helps support security and democracy across West Africa.
Where everyone is feeling the pinch, the economy will be top of mind for voters. This election isn't just about Ghana's future, it's about tackling issues locally in Ghana that actually resonate globally. So issues like excessive debt, climate change, and democracy. The world will be watching closely as Ghana makes its choice.
We will be watching and reporting on it, that's for sure. Now, I don't need to tell you, Christmas is around the corner. And at work, that means probably for many of you a Christmas party. Like it or loathe it. Maybe a visit to the pub on the boss or something a little more extravagant. But what about something potentially more fulfilling, such as volunteering? Business leaders are being asked to look to volunteering as a way of engaging employees into their local community. Well, today is International Volunteer Day, and Philippa Cornish is from the Charities Aid Foundation and explained what businesses are doing and how they are gaining more from volunteering.
Volunteering can be a really important way to connect businesses and the communities that they work in. It's a great way to engage employees, as you said, and make them feel part of the communities they're in, and also connect them to some of the issues that may be affecting the areas they operate in. And there's a lot of research that show that when businesses support charity, it really attracts employees, makes them feel more loyal to their employer. And so there's a lot of good reasons to do it.
And the way it works is, in most cases, is the employees will take a day out of their normal working diary and actually be doing something completely different with a local charity.
Exactly. A day, some businesses offer up to 5 days of the company time to let their employees do something a bit different, which can be a very re-energizing and rewarding experience. Often businesses will have a partnership with a charity, and part of that partnership, as well as funding them, will be chances to spend time with the charity and support them with things that they need, whether it be something skills-based or something a little bit more physical.
And to what extent do charities rely on this, the corporate volunteering?
They do rely on it. Particularly, I think there's a lot of value in a business providing some skills-based volunteering. So people that maybe write a social media plan in their day job could support a charity with conceiving their social media plan. And there's a lot of options to do that, which is quite flexible, which is really making the most of the skills on the one side and the need on the other. I think where it's just a one-off day, you've got to be careful not to treat it just as a fun team building exercise and think about what the charity really needs and what the cost and resource might be to the charity to offer that day. So the best thing to do is really ask the charity what they need, how best to do it, and also maybe consider supporting them with some kind of financial donation as well so that they can resource that properly.
And when it comes to volunteering currently, how is the UK doing? Are we doing more of it now than, say, pre-COVID?
No, we are a country of volunteers still. Around 7 million people volunteer annually, which is a good army of volunteers. But before the pandemic, the level was more like 12 million. So we've lost a good 5 million, unsurprisingly, with all the changes that happened. Although on the corporate side, we do a report into corporate giving and volunteering, and we have seen a year-on-year increase since last year. So there are some signs that businesses are getting their programs back together, and there is a slight uptick there.
There you go. Nice to end on a positive note with Philippa Cornish there. One last story to squeeze in. The amount of Guinness pubs can buy in the build-up to Christmas has been limited by its maker Diageo after what they call exceptional demand over the past 3 weeks in the UK. It's understood the firm is working at 100% production capacity, but has still placed limits on orders in Great Britain. The drink's been rising in popularity with women and...
Minister Michel Barnier expected to resign later after the government was toppled by a no-confidence vote. This is the scene live in the capital, Paris, where it's 8 in the morning. President Macron will address the nation later. We'll have the very latest.
I'm Steve Lai in Seoul, where the impeachment process against President Yoon is underway. But there is a snag for those opposition parties looking to impeach him.
The human rights group Amnesty International has accused Israel of committing genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. Israel strenuously denies the allegations. And police in New York use facial recognition in the hunt for a man who shot dead the boss of a major US health company. Hello, I'm Nicky Schiller. Welcome to the programme. We start this hour with the political and financial crisis in France. For the first time in more than 60 years, the government has been brought down by a no-confidence vote by MPs. Michel Barnier will present his resignation later, becoming the shortest-serving Prime Minister in the history of modern France. The vote was decisive. 288 votes were needed to unseat Mr Barnier. In the end, 331 were cast to remove him. The budget, which was the cause of his downfall, is now defunct. France has been plagued by political uncertainty since the summer election resulted in a hung parliament, a result that can't be changed in an election before next July. Let's take you to the scene live in Paris, where it has just gone 8 o'clock in the morning. President Macron will address the nation this evening. He is also expected to appoint a new Prime Minister quickly, not least because US President-elect Donald Trump is due in Paris this weekend for the opening of the Notre Dame Cathedral after the fire 5 years ago. Our first report this hour is from our Paris correspondent, Andrew Harding.
Moments before the voting began here in Paris, Michel Barnier made a final, rather forlorn plea to French MPs. The Prime Minister urged them to back him, his government and his budget, or create chaos.
Mesdames et messieurs les députés, je ne me résous pas.
I can't believe a majority of MPs here will vote to destabilize our institutions at a moment where our country is going through a deep moral, economic, financial and civic crisis.
Économique, financière et civique.
But the answer came back fast and conclusive.
Pour l'adoption 331.
The Speaker of Parliament revealing that 57% of MPs had voted no confidence in the government. Politicians from the hard right and hard left of French politics briefly uniting on this one issue.
I don't feel my head spinning, and I don't consider this a victory. We had a choice to make, and the choice we made was to protect French people.
Having tasted blood, many French MPs now want more. Specifically, they want President Emmanuel Macron ousted. Heading home from a trip to Saudi Arabia, a badly weakened president has made it clear he's staying put. It is 62 years since France last found itself in a situation like this. On that occasion, President de Gaulle stood his ground and eventually regained control of Parliament. Today feels rather different. France is in debt, public frustration growing, a nation wrestling, like so many now, with the forces of polarisation and populism.
I
think it's tragic, says this woman, of today's vote. Nobody is considering the consequences. There's a lot of anxiety, this man adds. I'm upset both with the forces on the left and the far right. A government has fallen, but France's political deadlock remains firmly in place. Andrew Harding, BBC News, Paris.
And we'll be live in Paris with our correspondent Mark Lowen for the latest later this hour. But we're going to turn from the political turmoil in France to the political crisis in South Korea. The country's ruling party has said it will not vote to remove the president from office after his failed attempt to bring the country under martial law. The opposition is now trying to convince enough lawmakers to defect to their side before a vote on Saturday night. President Yoon's shock announcement on Tuesday night caused chaos in the country and was quickly overturned by Parliament. The Defence Minister has taken responsibility for the situation and resigned. He now faces a travel ban as prosecutors investigate. There has still been no word from the President himself. Well, let's get the very latest now from my colleague Steve Lai, who is in Seoul for us. Steve.
Yeah, thanks very much, Nikki. You're right that we haven't heard much from President Yoon at all. In fact, we haven't heard from him since he lifted that declaration for martial law just over a day ago. And we've also not expecting to hear from him as well. Local media have been reporting that the President's office have said that we're not expecting to hear from President Yoon at all today. Though when he does speak, we will, of course, bring that to our viewers. You mentioned as well that the former National Defense Minister has resigned. His resignation has been accepted by President Yoon, and he's also been put on an emergency travel ban, as you mentioned. He's accepted responsibility for the martial law declaration, and he's apologized for that. And that is really what caused all the political turmoil and chaos that we've seen here in South Korea over the last 2 days. Our Asia correspondent, Laura Bicker, has more on how the developments unfolded.
This candlelit cam followed a night of chaos. They gathered on the steps of the parliament with one aim: to call for the impeachment of a president who declared martial law.
Because we have a history of defending democracy a few times, the people will strongly defend democracy once more.
I'm out here as a citizen who could not sit by and watch the democracy breaking down.
Resign, the group chanted, before their Mexican wave. Such a different scene from last night's turmoil. President Yoon plunged his country into martial law. Soldiers broke through the windows of Parliament to prevent elected members from overturning his decree. They were unsuccessful. And after 6 hours, Seoul's Parliament, not just its president, were back in control. Today, the building bore the scars of that struggle. Repairs have already begun, as has a motion to impeach the president.
If they're willing to violate human rights under martial law, it's obvious that they're also ready to sacrifice people's lives. Stay alert and fight with us.
Protests sprung up in other parts of the city as South Koreans took a moment to reflect. The prospect of martial law brought back chilling memories of authoritarian rule. In the 1970s and 80s, groups of students in Seoul took on dictators, often clashing with riot police and risking their lives. Their defiance and resilience helped South Korea become a democratic country.
South Koreans value their democracy. They fought for it, some died for it. And although they may be questioning just how robust it may be, they've turned out in their thousands to protect it.
But President Yoon remains in power. Some tried to march to his office, but they were blocked by police. It's unclear whether Mr. Yoon hears their calls to resign. But until he does, these demonstrations, however peaceful, will only grow. Laura Bicker, BBC News, Seoul.
Yeah, and we've seen various protests throughout the day here in Seoul from different opposition parties and interest groups as well. You may even be able to hear some right now where I am at the National Assembly. They're just assembled outside the front gates, about 100 meters from here. Now, to get a better understanding of what's been transpiring through the day here in South Korea, I'm joined by Jean McKenzie, our Seoul correspondent. Great to be able to speak to you, Jean, about this and the developments that we've been seeing today. There have been some hearings. More information has been made available to us about what transpired that night when it came to those martial law decisions.
Yeah, so this morning and this afternoon we've been having hearings right inside here, inside the National Assembly. So the lawmakers have been questioning some of the key figures in South Korea's military, trying to find out what their role was in enacting this martial law. And one of the key things that's come out of this really today is just how little people seem to know and how few people around the president seem to know. And I would say
these are people at the top of
They really are. I think the most staggering revelation we've had today is that the head of the South Korean army, this is the person that President Yoon put in charge of running his martial law. He says that he only found out when he saw the president announce it on television. He's also come out and said that he is not an expert in martial law and that he didn't have any part in writing this martial law order. We've also heard from the Vice Defence Minister. He too said he found out about it from watching the president on the television. And we know already that he didn't consult with all of his cabinet, that he didn't tell the United States, South Korea's main military ally. So we're really getting a picture of just how isolated I think the president was in the run-up to making this decision and in announcing it.
Yeah, it was very much a surprise to everybody. And now we're beginning to see a picture of why it was a surprise to so many people, as so few people seem to be in on what was happening. We know that the impeachment is going to be taking place this Saturday at 7 p.m. There's been a struggle for the opposition, it seems, to get the votes that they're going to need to make that happen.
Yeah, so the opposition needs 8 votes from the ruling party, right, to get this supermajority in Parliament to be able to remove him from office. Now, they have tabled this vote for 7 o'clock on Saturday night, we think, because they're trying to give themselves actually now quite a bit of time, because they need to try and convince some of the members of the ruling party to defect and vote with them, because the ruling party has come out today and said that it is not going to vote to impeach the president, it is going to oppose this motion. Now, the vote is anonymous, so some of them could cross the floor, but I've been speaking to opposition lawmakers today, and honestly, they don't sound particularly hopeful that this is going to happen. They worry that the ruling party, they are going to vote as a bloc, and this is because actually, if the president were to be impeached, South Korea would have to hold elections, and the ruling party, given everything that's happened and the popularity of the president, they're not confident they would win those elections, of course, and so they don't see removing the president from office as their best bet right now. They'd probably rather wait the distance for the next elections.
Yeah, and you mentioned that the impeachment taking place, giving themselves more time on Saturday evening. They could, at their earliest, take place on Friday morning, so that's telling in itself. You mentioned also that the president had been sort of isolated in recent times. Do you know what public sentiment is towards the president at the moment?
Well, we've seen people on the streets protesting since he enacted martial law, and I think that's the key question, because even if the Assembly here doesn't vote to impeach the president on Saturday, the question is going to be, is the public going to go along with this decision? I mean, the people on the streets have been saying to us that they are going to carry on protesting until he is removed from office. And if we look at the last South Korean president that was impeached, that was Park Geun-hye in 2017, now we saw the protests build and build and build until there were more than 1 million people on the streets. So if it carries on like this, then it could become that his position is just untenable. We had some polling out today which showed that actually 75% of the public now support him being impeached.
Yeah, thanks very much, Jean. We'll leave it there for now. Jean McKenzie there, our Seoul correspondent. Well, the rain has started to come down on us here at the National Assembly. It will be a real test for those protesters that are taking to the streets in various parts of Seoul today. We're expecting those to pick up as well as the working day comes to a close and the evening commences. But as we're all looking to find out, Nikki, what's going to happen to the president, he's still not speaking. We'll have to see if the voice of the people will be heard here in Korea.
Steve Lai, live in there. Thank you very much. And don't forget, we have a live page up and running on the BBC News